JavaScript is the language of the web. It was founded in 1985 by Brendan Eich, and it only took him 10 days to complete. It was created in order to have a lightweight client-side language for the web. And because of its dynamic usage on both the front end and the back end applications today, it is used by over 63% of web developers. But anyways, by the end of this video, you will have a clear understanding of the basics of JavaScript. And no, you're not going to learn JavaScript through and through, but you'll have a good understanding of how it works and the different features that it has. So the first aspect of JavaScript are variables. And a variable simply stores different data types. Think of an egg basket where we have different types of eggs. Maybe we have like a blue egg, a red egg, a yellow egg, and each of those eggs represents a data type stored in a variable, aka the basket. And we have three different types of variables. The first two are var and let, and those are interchangeable. Basically, you can use the variable name in multiple areas. So you see here we have hi and hi. Think of these as reusable baskets. And on the other hand, we have const. This is a variable that can only be used in one place. So we can't have two instances of hi2. If we did, we would get an error. So again, variables simply store data types. So in this case, we're storing hello and hi. So when we call hi, it will print out hello. And there are three different types of variables: var, let, and const. And as said, variables store data types. And the different data types include strings. And a string is basically a text. Another type of data type is numbers. This is basically a numerical number. We have if-else statements, which simply say that if something is true, then do this. So in this case, we set the name to Nizar, which is my name. And we said here that if the name is Nizar, then do something. And then the else part of an if-else statement says that if it isn't, then do something else. Now, this isn't completely a data type, but I wanted to just include it here. The next data type we have is a Boolean. So a Boolean simply represents two values that can be true or false. So in this situation, we set my age to 22. So obviously when we're checking if the age is 22, it could either be true or false. There's nothing else. And how we check for Booleans is through different methods. So first we have the triple equal, which simply means if it is this number. So we're saying if my age literally means 22, then do this is my age. Next, we have a less than sign, which simply checks if it is less than 22. And we also have a greater than 22. Now, obviously, there's different ways of checking. We also have like less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, but these tend to be the most popular. We also have if it does not equal, but yeah, there's a bunch of ways to check for Booleans. The next data type we have is null. It simply means that we are intentionally keeping a variable without a value. You'll usually use null when you don't have a value for a variable yet, where maybe you're waiting for data, where you want to put the data later in time. We also have undefined. Undefined isn't really used in JavaScript, and it is usually given as an error for not having a value. So in this situation, we did not give a value to the variable x. And then when we console log the value, we will get an output that says undefined. Objects is our next data type. Objects is the collection of properties. So in this situation, the person variable has a first name, last name, age, and eye color. So that way, when we call this person variable, the person's data will be shown. So think of verification where we need the email, password, and first name. This is where objects would be used. And the final data type is arrays. An array is a special variable that holds multiple different data. So let's say we made a survey where we collected people's favorite color. We could simply create a variable, and in the array, we can name off the different colors that people put as an answer. So maybe someone said red, someone said green, someone said blue. And then later on, maybe we could call this data in a graph or display it on the site. Next up, we have control structure. Functions are a block of code designed to do a specific task. So for example, let's say you're at a job and you're given a task list of things you need to do that day. That is the equivalent of functions in JavaScript. Now, the first type of function is a function declaration. Basically, the function can be called anywhere in the code. So in this function over here, we have a function greet with the name. And basically here, whenever the user puts in their name, it says like hello name. However, as you can see here, it is used before the function is called. That is because JavaScript ignores this until this is run and then it goes back to call it. That is because we use a function declaration. And basically we tell JavaScript to just ignore this until this is called and then go back to that. However, on the other hand, we have function expressions. And the simple difference between function expression and function declarations is that in the function expression, we cannot call the function before it is made. And as you can see, the difference is very subtle. Here is just function greet name, and in here we have to put it in a variable and then call it. And the final function we have are arrow functions. This is just a faster and more concise way of writing function expressions. So you can write it like this or like this. But basically in the modern age, most people just use arrow functions for functional expressions because it's faster. Next up, we have APIs. And APIs, or application programming interface, are functions that can be called in your code. And this piece of data can be called from your end or an outsider's end. So for example, here we're using an API from this site right here. And basically we call this site, we parse through the data and then log the data. So in simple terms, an API is just a piece of data that is being called from some place and then displayed on your site. And there are a million different types of APIs. Even the biggest companies in the world provide their data to be used on your site. For example, let's say you want to display a couple testimonials on your site from people who posted about you on Twitter. You can simply use the Twitter API, call it on your site, and then display the specific type of tweet that you want. Asynchronous functions, on the other hand, are exactly like functions, but are typically used when you're calling a piece of data in your function, as it would take a long time. And in this situation, rather than using a regular function where we would have to wait a couple of seconds for the data to come, tell the code to call the API and then get the data. And the main difference then between an asynchronous function and a regular function is in this situation, we are telling the code to just, continue doing everything, go through everything, and anything that takes a long time, go back to it later. And the main usage of this is to just not make your site very clunky. Like when you're calling a bunch of data in your bigger applications, it takes a while to call those pieces of data. And by including asynchronous functions on those sites, everything will stay working, and the things that take a long time to get will eventually come. And by using asynchronous functions, rather than having to wait for that data to come, the site runs and then calls the data eventually. For loops, on the other hand, are ways to loop over things multiple times. It is typically used in repetitive actions. So in this situation, both things do the exact same functions. But by having this control structure where we are looping through the numbers 10 times, it makes it much more efficient than calling it like this. And we also have do while loops. This is another type of control structure where we're telling the code to do something while something is true. So in this variable over here, we're simply telling it to console log the number if it is less than 10. Next up, we have the DOM. The DOM, or the document object model, is a tree-like structure, and within it has a node that does a specific task. So in this situation, in our HTML file, the head of the DOM would be the HTML, and within it, the different nodes might include the head, the body tags, and the script tag. And we can manipulate the DOM using something like getElementById. And in this situation, we manipulated the DOM to input hello world within the input. We also have something called events in JavaScript. An event is things that happen to HTML elements as a result of a JavaScript function. So for example, let's say we wanted to create a button where every time it was clicked, we get a message saying that this button was clicked. We'd first write the HTML, then we would write an add event listener where it would check when that button is clicked. And we connected it using the HTML ID. And now when we click this button, we get a message over here saying that the button was clicked. So in simple terms, JavaScript is a way to make websites interactive. You can use stuff like event listeners where we listen for a click or a button switch or something like that. We can also manipulate the HTML using JavaScript. And by utilizing functions and APIs, you can send data back and forth, create authentication, and make the web apps that you really want to make. And by simply calling the script tag in your HTML, you can start writing JavaScript in the HTML file. I know we didn't cover absolutely everything, but I hope you have a good understanding of how JavaScript works and how you can utilize it on your web app. But yeah, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Happy coding, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.